Welcome to the Critical Fools podcast. This is episode 46. The film this week we'll be discussing is The White Tiger, directed by Ramin Bahrani. I believe I pronounced that as close as I could. This film came out actually in, I believe, 2020, actually this year, January 6th, actually. And it's a film about, I guess, based in India, about, somebody who's at the bottom of their social caste system and how he's navigating kind of like the modernization of India, right? I don't think they really give us the time frame of it, but it does seem like he is of this generation that I think we have become well accustomed to in America and the West of, the the industrialization, the modern industrialization of a country into the IT scene, into a global marketplace. And we kind of follow that through one character's journey. I believe his name before he changes it is Balaram, like how you Balaram, and then we'll get to that when he changes his name. But I picked this film because it was actually recommended to me from my folks, and actually I watched it like some months ago, but it was always in the back pocket because I think there's a lot of interesting topics in this film, and also we haven't really done a film of this kind of like focus, we've done some economic issues, but we never done
this is different, right? I mean,
a bit different on India and everything.
Yeah, India has a different economy than I would say most other countries or like foreign films that we've covered that cover different sort of cultures and countries, right? India is a very unique and very different.
So the movie has an interesting style where it just jumps you into it with his narration. What did you think of obviously what did you think of the film as your first impressions? Because I think just because it's like something we haven't done before, it definitely jumps to you. So I'm just curious to get your initial thoughts on what you feel like in the beginning. Were you expecting the twists, or were you expecting this film pick? And
I thought it was a good film overall. You pointed to the fact that the main character narrates sort of his thoughts throughout the film, and his voice sort of guides the narration or the narrative structure of the film. And so, I feel like that's not unique. I've seen other films that have done that, but it's been a while. But I did like a lot of the themes and sort of it never felt slow, which is what I would give this film, even though it was a bit longer. It was a little over 2 hours. And I thought the flow and the acting was done very well in this movie.
Yeah, I think what was interesting is that I know a bit about India, not just because I have friends that are from that country, but also back in high school for one semester I was part of the I forget what it was called, but how the immersion program, and I did the.
But you didn't go to India, did you?
You can go. My mom pulled me out in the end, but
why?
Yeah, that's for off camera. But that's for off camera. But I did one semester.
I have a feeling I think I might know why, but okay.
I know, but that was, but during that one semester with teacher won't name because we're protecting identities in this pod. I got to read not just a typical book on Gandhi and stuff, but Indian caste system and also how they view women in the society. And that was probably my first gleaming into that caste system culture before I would learn more about it as an adult. But yeah, I found the beginning also because the main character, his background is he's on the underclass, right? He works in the rural village. You see in the beginning how his father becoming sick kind of just pivots his whole life, right? If his father doesn't get sick, he might have not even, end up where he ended up, right?
Well, he was chosen to be part of sort of an advanced program to actually study in Delhi.
Yeah.
But that didn't actually work out.
Yeah, because the father ended up getting sick, and that pivoted
he
the whole thing.
Work off his debts and things like that. By the way, this is something I will say. I like the dynamics with the grandmother, because I feel like it was very controlling, because I felt like there was some overlap with Latino culture. With some of the grandmothers who can be a little controlling. That's sort of another stereotype. So when I was hearing that, I was like, man, there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's very interesting because, you would, people from the outside would view the culture as very patriarchal, but this is why like power dynamics are very like nuanced, to quote you. It is because like the more I learn about through people I know now of the Indian culture, it's a different type of power they wield. You know,
I think the greater society in India is probably more patriarchal, but I think who ends up having a lot of the familial decision powers is probably more like the grandmother.
yeah, I think females do. It to a certain degree, because I do know of cases where like when it comes to the career stuff, the men dictate, but when it comes to, like you said, like
Familial affairs.
familial affairs, approving should your kid get married to somebody or how they feel about that, the mothers,
Oh
grandmothers have a
yeah,
lot more say.
another great sort of, and this is more of a reality TV show, but it still gives you some insight into how some of these dynamics work. Is a show called Indian Matchmaking, where you really see the pressure some of these Indian mothers apply to their kids to get married. Some of them is crazy. It's just not necessarily part of our culture, which is why it's wild to see like some of the things they say.
Yeah, it's definitely marriage.
Yeah,
is definitely
there was one kid. She's like one mother. She's like, "You're 24. You should have been married 2 years ago." I was like, "What?"
Yeah, it's one of those things where actually having like a lot of exposure myself now, like it's one of those things where I realize that even if it's not arranged anymore, a lot of that's still dynamic.
It's just this feeling that you have, and I'm sure you. I mean, several friends of yours that are Indian. I'm sure they can attest to that.
Yeah, it's more like it's not like I said, age is a factor, but also last name, what kind of stock they. It's like these are the kind of things I hear, and these are the things that you used to read, like maybe like like in the 19th century.
Well, let's use a term that they use a lot. You need what's very important in terms of choosing a mate is the biodata.
They actually even these are like for the audience. These are not even like don't think like these are like old couples. These are like couples.
Nah, dude, this is like our age.
They get their readings and everything. Yeah, like they go to experts.
Yeah, so like this is something that personally like irks me at times is just how much certain people in the West here say they're not religious, but really hold the deep belief in astrology. So a lot of the astrology belief system that actually stems from Hinduism, and so like a lot of times when people are getting married, you have to understand like when their moons align, things like that. It's not quite as serious as it was back in the day, but astrology is literally derived from like Hinduism.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really add on.
Sorry, I throw that in because, because I've talked to some people who are like, I'm not religious, but I believe in astrology. Well, first of all, religion's a belief system, and second of all, astrology is in part derived from Hinduism, so that is a religion in a way. Anyway, sorry, that was I digress. That was my little.
Returning to the film, so we're talking about like the rural background he comes from, and you see that like once his father dies, like I said, the grandmother is now fully in control. She basically has plans for him to marry like a local village girl. But again, going back to the main character's kind of like a trait that he's gonna have throughout the film, his kind of like out of the box / also like nuanced thinking, is that he ends up convincing his grandmother to let him learn how to drive so he can become a chauffeur and send some of the profits back to the family. Right? He knows like if he just says like, oh, like the truth, right? Because we hear in his head, right? Like, I'm just trying to get out of here. I don't want to live the life like she, is dictating to me.
I'm done. Yeah, I don't want to be under her grip my whole life. Just like, and he looks at his brother the whole time and he's like, you're stuck. You're not going anywhere. Yeah. Because he got married and his life is basically doomed is what his thinking is.
And so, like, instead of like being like, obviously showing all his cards, which would have been dumb, he has an intuitive understanding that like he needs to just play the game a little bit and then just get his foot out the door, right? So he does learn to become a driver. Then he becomes a chauffeur for the family that actually owns, that land, that
a lot of the town.
And that to me, that was the first time in the film I was just like, this is interesting, very interesting, because you see that like,
Well, it reminds me a little bit of Parasite in that way.
Yeah.
I think you know what I mean, because they become maids for like some of the elites.
Yeah, exactly. I think what was interesting though is I didn't know this, that like if they cross the their, I'm gonna use the term master here, like they will go and destroy their family, so they have to,
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised, but to see a film articulate that, especially in our more sensitive era of filmmaking, where the only bad people are
other cultures around the world don't necessarily care about what's going on in terms of sensitivity here in the U.S.
Yeah, but you know how it is. The political dynamic now is that only certain people can be the bad guys. But but yeah, they're pretty ruthless there.
Right. Let's talk about oh my gosh, who was it? What was the Prime Minister of the Philippines? What's his name? I'm losing it.
I know his face.
The reason I bring him up, it's like he had a policy where they would basically just anyone who was doing drugs, they would just shoot on sight.
Yeah,
and you couldn't fathom that happening here.
Yeah, and he's also put journalists in prison.
Yeah.
Let's see. So anyways, so what's interesting is that in this, when he's being a chauffeur for this family, right? Like, it's not just being a chauffeur, right? He's basically like a slave in many ways, right? Like, he has to wash the head of the family's feet. That I think is a powerful scene, right? I'm curious what you thought about, like, I guess in general, that how they depicted the caste system in many ways.
That dynamic, I mean, they don't. Oh man, it's a messed up dynamic. Because they basically don't view them like people who are in lower caste, they view as less than, borderline like subhuman, which is why it's crazy to see these like thought processes sort of develop and still play out. And while they're kind of breaking away from them, it's not really a lot of these beliefs, even though it's not official, there's still these unofficial beliefs that are still held by greater society in India. I have known several co-workers who are from India who still sort of discuss this and still say, while it's not as prevalent as it is with the older generations, some of these ideas still exist.
Yeah,
and I think the film did a good job of sort of showing to the extent that, especially how the elites like it, right? Because they're at the top end of this hierarchy, so they can just look down upon everybody else, and it's really sad because. Right, if you're just born into a lower caste, you just don't have any opportunity, right? This idea of like a meritocracy here in the West, there's none of that in India because you're just sort of doomed to the position that you were born into.
Yeah. So going back, exactly. Going back to the film, right? He has to wash feet. He has to do all these other demeaning chores, right? Not just being a chauffeur. But he is still like super ambitious, right? So before I get to what he does to this Balaram does to the other driver, what did you think of the initial interactions he had with Ashok and Pinky, his fiance / wife? I think it was actually wife.
So it was interesting, right? Because obviously, and this is what I was talking about, was because there's a lot of overlap with sort of migration from India to here and to the U.S. and to like other parts of the world. The Ashok and his wife sort of represent, the newer generation that's more world. They weren't just clothed or like born and raised into India. So like their ideas are beyond that, and yet they still sort of. What's interesting is, as progressive as they try to seem, they still inevitably treat Balaram pretty badly at times, right? They still view him while they feel bad. Like, it's kind of weird because they're like, it's horrible how they view like the other children, like in terms of Ashok's dad and the brother of the mongoose. As much as they're like they find it appalling how they treat Balaram, they don't treat him much better either. It's just more like subtle, right? I mean, at a certain point, they tell basically Balaram that, or at least I believe Ashok tells Balaram, like, I wish they'd put you in jail, right? Or they go along with like having him be the scapegoat, right?
Yeah,
with a piece of paper. Yeah. Like, they still view them as like, oh, his life is less than ours.
Yeah.
So I think the film did a good job of sort of portraying that.
Yeah.
Even though while they're like different, they really aren't in that way. They're still part of that elite structure that still views the lower caste in a negative light.
Yeah. I mean, again, not to disclose any information, but I've heard quotes from people I know who I consider my friends now that like, yeah, I'm swiping on the apps and her last name was so and so, and
Patel. Yeah.
disqualify.
Mhm.
I'll like so yeah.
Well, because they're not, and beyond not being from the cast, what's crazy, well, I guess not crazy, it's just like what's also very important is that they're from the same region of India that they are.
Yeah, exactly. So what's very interesting to me is
It's like,
that,
oh, she's from Delhi. Well, I want someone who's from Hyderabad.
yeah, the Ashok and Pinky, his wife, especially the wife Pinky, because she was raised in America. They remind me those two characters remind me the most of the people I know now in real life.
Sure, because you don't live in India, so you wouldn't necessarily meet people very often that are like the father or like the mongoose.
Exactly.
Or
And I want to give credence to your point of like they're very westernized, but every so often you see the trinkle of the old world, as I'll call it.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, they still hold a lot of the. While they won't admit it, they still act as if they hold those sort of ideas to be true.
Yeah.
What was, by the way, side note, I found it hilarious that Pinky was born in Jackson Heights since you live in New York, and we were talking about possibly going to eat somewhere there. That's why, I saw this film. I don't think
it'll happen in your next trip, but like, yeah, Jackson Heights is not that. Actually, I live.
I was cracking up. Dude.
I live not that far from Jackson Heights.
No, you're very close. That's why I was like, wow, it's a small world. I was like the specific neighborhood that they reference. But yeah, no, it was interesting. I think they did a good job, sort of bringing about a lot of the nuance within the characters and within Indian culture.
Yeah, I agree.
The scene before we get actually let's get to that first. So yeah, what did you think about what Balaram did to the driver? It's sort of the first really major event that happens.
Yeah, I would say it revealed a lot of his character, right? Like the typical. It's interesting how like I think one of the undertoning messages of this film is like capitalism, our system, also like the people who rise up have some of these attributes where he knows that this is like the kryptonite for this guy. Like this guy has a comfortable job, he's
been driving for 20 years.
Yeah, there's this tension you can tell in the beginning that like he doesn't want to be supplanted because he has a good thing going. It's interesting how it's all relative, right? He thinks he has a good thing going when maybe the audience, given our background, is like, what?
It's all relative, dude.
Yeah, and so, but like you said, like our main character has such ambition, has such drive, which we see manifest through the whole film. That he knows that like if he can supplant it,
if he wants to move up, he's got to take that opportunity.
He's got to
sort of kill or be killed.
And I think they don't over explain it because I think the director expects you to have this kind of understand that like in Indian culture, like if you're Muslim, you're pretty much like
that's something if you aren't really familiar, you don't quite understand the level of tension that Hindus and Muslims have in India. It's like if you haven't paid attention to politics within India the last 6-7 years, then you wouldn't be that aware of Modi, who is a prime minister, and how he sort of put forward a lot of Hindu nationalist thinking, which is really sort of given rise to a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in India. And there's the big tension between Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims.
Yep. And just when that fact is also interesting how he reveals that fact, right? He's driving the father and he just lets it slip. Oh, sure. But he my take is that it was there to reveal something that I guess not reveal, but like just show the audience another not an aspect, but like basically that like to your point, like Hindus and Muslims, there's tension, and if you're not aware, it's well documented, and because I think the reason they don't explain it, and this is maybe the good thing about good filmmakers, is that if you don't know, it gets you thinking like, wait, what? And then you start looking it up, right? And then you start learning that way. So, but yeah, that was his first. Also, going back to the narrative of the story, that's the second time, but more like you said, severe time where he shows that his ambition will not be constrained. Like he will do what it takes to survive. Mm-hmm. That's a theme throughout the movie for his character, right? Like it's like he'll do what it takes to survive. and he makes mistakes along the way because, like you said, like we'll get to the confession stuff, but he, he will even kill. We'll get to that too, to get where he needs to get to, and he gets where he wants to get to in the end. But one could argue at what cost. But at the same time, like we'll get to the ending in it.
Yeah, I mean, we still have a lot to get through before we get to the ending. One thing that I wanted to ask you is, what did you think about the socialist politician?
You have to trigger my memory in that. I think
so. There was remember that there's a woman who's part of the lower ranks, and she climbs through, and she's part of the Socialist or Social Democrat Party. She's supposed to be the advocate for the poor, and she basically said, it's hilarious, right? Because and I guess this is what I wanted to ask you, is because she's supposed to be the advocate for the poor, and yet she expects that they give money. She expects bribes from the rich family.
Oh yeah, it again. So I think that's another mechanism where the director is trying to show, especially for I think a Western audience, how things kind of work in India.
How corrupt it is, really.
Yeah, like.
And how corrupt it is in many
there's corruption countries here too, but like as we like to say, we've legalized the corruption.
We're legal, bro. We don't have corruption. Corruption's not corruption if it's legal.
Yeah. But there, like, even though it's illegal to bribe, everybody expects bribes, right? Because we see this with the Shook too, right? Like, or that's the
more. This is my issue, and we can go on a tangent. It's like this is supposed to be the person who's for the poor. We're trying to help, right? And she doesn't really. In the film, she isn't portrayed as doing anything for the poor. She's just portrayed in certain sequences as winning and expecting bribes.
Yeah, and we see this theme throughout, right? Like even Ashok, the son, he was
disgusted at one point because he's just like he's like, what a joke, the world's biggest democracy. He's like, we just gave bribes to make sure that like our family stays intact in power.
And then his evolution is that eventually he just like
he normalized. It's normalized where he just that's all he does is give bribes.
Yeah, he's like the bribe maker. Yeah, so it's like. But I think that sequence is supposed to show us, the audience, that like in India, unfortunately, and probably maybe in its own way explain why Modi rose the way he did, because he said like he was the champion against this.
That's what happens with a lot of nationalist populist figures, is they sort of run on a platform of anti-corruption. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. And 99% of the time, they don't do anything. They just perpetuate that corruption. They just put their own cronies in there instead.
Yeah, but right.
Even leftist populists do the same, right? I'm looking at you, AMLO.
Oh damn! I don't have to out him. Say that for the Mexican films, dude.
Yeah, okay.
So I think I answered your question, where it's basically I viewed it as a way for the film to express like another aspect of India that people may not be aware of, that like this, even though like you said there are allies and there's proto ops with Modi, that like on the ground level, like people at every form of government are expected to just lift up their shirt and like, here's the money,
give me the hat. You want to keep your monopoly on your coal industry, you give me the money now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And she even says at one point, she's like, you don't pay taxes because I say you don't have to pay taxes, but you got to give me money. And it's like, well, what good is that? It's really sad seeing that, especially like, I mean, you and I have both been to like many, like I've traveled a decent bit. You traveled to like many more countries abroad, I think, than I have. But I've also been abroad, but it's just, you see level of poverty abroad, and especially in the US, right? But there's one thing when you have sort of corruption that takes place, but you have certain amenities that you at least give to the poor, like clean, like plumbing and sewage. And this is in India, a lot of the country doesn't necessarily have that. And that's something that politicians should work to do. And you can blame the US, or I guess the Western powers, for not helping in the best way to develop that. But at the end of the day, it has a lot of that impotent, or of that responsibility falls on sort of the politicians and elites in India, and they choose to just bag the money and not do anything to sort of help sort of the infrastructure within the country.
Yeah, and I think one of the, I don't know if this is an intended consequence or not, but with those scenes with the politician and also with the, Ashok's family, I think it's supposed to really make us empathize with Balaram. Like, in this world, how can you get ahead and not be?
You don't even have
Yeah.
I think in the Western world we don't really have appreciation for a lot of blue collar workers. But do you know how many lives plumbers have saved? That the quality of life that plumbers have essentially given to like you and I to sort of like live our everyday life in relative peace. It's insane. And in certain countries, especially like India, you don't have that luxury, right? It's people that die all the time from poor sanitation, which is incredibly sad and something that a government and politicians should work to. If you're going to try to if you're going to take money and corruption, at least give the people something. And they don't. Even he says, Balaram says, in India we don't have XYZ. One of them includes sewage. And he's like, but we have plenty of entrepreneurs. And he's like, if I was a politician, he's like, I put sewage at the top of my priority.
Yeah, but it's not sexy, You gotta get those entrepreneurs, innovation,
Yeah, it's like they have a bunch of tech, some of the world's brightest people. I was like, but they don't do. They're part of the issue, I think, is with the cast is they don't feel the need to necessarily work through some of that public infrastructure that's so vital to really help the people who are most struggling in the country.
Yeah, well, if you don't view them as human, then why do that?
They don't. Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's
That's
insane.
It's like what's the term? Like it's the loop they're stuck in, right? Oh, why should I help them if I don't think they're worth helping?
Which is nuts. And you can go to like the poorest parts here in the U.S. The one thing that we do have almost everywhere is sewage. Almost everywhere. I wouldn't say every aspect, but on the majority of places here in the U.S. we do.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. The next thing I wanted to ask you, since we're sort of moving along with the film, what did you think of the other drivers in Delhi, or that dynamic that Balaram has with them?
Yeah, I remember that because I forgot that like he meets all these other drivers and you see that they're all like different, right? I mean, this is part of the film's strong point.
One of them had the skin disease, vitiligo.
Yeah, but also you see that all the drivers are like they're also in their own way are just like
well, you had the city drivers in Balaram's country. Balaram is country, right? Yeah. So you even see like some of the references or like the way they like move is different than what he's used to, right? Because they clown, they dog, they like to talk smack, and he's just not used to that.
Yeah, but I think it expresses like kind of like how when people are just trying to like, take what they can in life. You become basically I think these characters were there to show us the audience that like Balaram is unique, right? His character arc is unique, but also like all these other characters, like he's not the only, like you said, there's drivers with different mentalities, different backgrounds, and like you said, he's not used to not just the talk, but like also how like in any way cynical view of how they view the world, like they're just
and especially their masters, right?
Yeah, yeah, because they see through the warts, right? And they're just like they're not stupid.
Balaram at this point is not jaded. These people have been through the ringer, so they're jaded as heck. And at a certain point, you see sort of the evolution of how he becomes like them. But more what I wanted to bring is it's interesting because the way they talk, sort of the way they there's several scenes where they view like women, where it's just in a very sexist tone that they sort of regard, I guess, like the other sex. And part of, I think they didn't go into this film quite as much, but part of something that is plaguing Indian society to a big extent, which is also sort of plaguing China, is those are the two countries with the world's biggest gender imbalances. And that's leading to bad relations amongst the sexes. And you see this reported through huge levels of sexual assault. And you sort of see this in the way that's, I'm not trying to equate that, but or the two necessarily, but I think that's something that and when you're talking about Indian society, that needs to sort of be addressed, right? Is that gender imbalance is leading to sort of these negative consequences within society.
Yeah, and I think also speaks to how, like,
the views of the that males have towards the other sex.
Yeah, and how it's, right now in academic literature in the West, it's very easy for us to say, like, oh, the exploitative marketplace and the women are being commodified. But like what you see in this film is that, like, it's partly a cultural thing. It's not just like
a hugely cultural thing.
It's not just capitalism. It's like
it's not capitalism. Part of it was just sort of societal's, man, and this is before capitalism. Societal's, especially in India, its preference to have males over females.
Yeah, it's because of the dowries. Like even like now, like even weddings now of young people that are
that's something that doesn't talk about a lot. Is the family has to pay a lot.
Yeah, it's still viewed that, like, when if you have a daughter and she marries a man, like, she's technically not part of their family, and like you have to give like almost a parting gift,
yeah, which is insane.
It is not cheap. So that's why daughters are just really, like, even economically just expensive. And so if you're lower on this caste system, you're thinking, well, I'm sorry, but
I can't afford this. I can barely afford to feed myself.
I gotta kill the child. Like I can't even afford
it. Yeah, infanticide in certain areas of India is just pretty high. So it's really sad and insane that practice is still
there's no other option.
Relevant. Yeah, but that's something that was sort of a side note just within Indian culture. It really doesn't have much to do with the film. But yeah, I just thought since this film deals with a lot of Indian society, it's important to talk about that aspect.
Yeah, it's good that you jumped in there, because I was going to say the next thing I wanted to bring up was the I think one of the turning points in the movie where Pinky accidentally kills a child, and then some of the dialogue there was heavy about, like, does that child even matter? And then let's
get into it.
But then also, like, how they kind of, like, they shouldn't be driving, but because he doesn't feel enough power to say no to them, he lets them do what they want.
And people talk about in here about power dynamics, but that's power dynamic to a new level, because their society is you're lower than I am, and what the heck is he gonna do? Like, if you feel uncomfortable, at least here in the U.S., you can decide to quit and try to find another job. But with him, the opportunities are so limited, and he's so grateful that he's a driver for them, that he can't say no, or how he says he has that servant sort of mentality.
Yeah.
They say that a lot in this film with the chicken coop analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, they do.
Anyway, was there a specific thing that you wanted to talk about?
I like, what did you think? Because I thought one of the most powerful dialogues in that scene is when, like, he says, like, because they're all like panicking, oh, should we report it? And he actually says, like,
he said, no one saw us.
Yeah. He says the truth that I don't think it's articulated often in maybe cinema, that, like, the sad truth is that kid's life did not matter. And
and it's just crazy because you talk about blaming the victim. They're like, what was the kid doing out at 2 a.m.? And they sort of use that as justification for, like, what they did or not taking responsibility, which is insane because they ran over a kid. And they're like, oh, these families have like 10, 11, 12, 13 kids. What does one matter? I was just like, whoa. Like,
it was power. That was a strong scene, dude. I was just like, whoa. We're saying things that I don't think, that's how they think. I don't think it's said often.
I think within certain circles in India, it's probably said often, but not at public.
Yeah. So for the film to take a courageous decision to be like, we know this is what some families think, like.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it's just crazy.
Yeah, I just want to get your reaction to it, because I think
it was just like, you knew what was going to happen. Like, it was building up to that. Just DUI, drinking and driving. You knew something was going to happen. I was like, yep. And you see it because you see some of the you see some of the homeless there, right? From some of the lower castes that are sleeping on the streets, because that was also weird. They're like, nah, you like. That's the other thing, and that's why I got so annoyed with Pinky. Is she gets mad at him for, like, getting mad at one of the servants or one of the bigger children, right? She gives her she buys one of the little, like, Buddha statues from her, and she's like, oh, she's so sweet, blah blah, and then she drops Balaram off, like acting like she's just going to abandon, and then later on she hits a kid, and they just go about their business. It's just like, wait a second, you got mad at him for like getting like treating one of the girls badly, but then you kill him, and then you just want to like cast all blame off.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh man, the level of rational is insane.
And that connects to something that you said earlier.
I think Pinky and Ashok are just fake.
Yeah, but also like you mentioned how like he ends up signing this confession that was like approved by the grandmother, and how like you said like going.
Yeah, because she doesn't care. She just wants to get her bread.
Yeah, and then going to your what you just said about the couple being fake, right? They don't really. Oh no! Like they're all like looking down.
This isn't right. This is what we want to do, but they don't do anything to stop that from happening. Yeah. That crazy injustice.
Yeah, and he ends up signing the forms, which is he admits like one of the things he shouldn't have done. But
well, he said he should have asked for more. In retrospect, he didn't ask for anything. He's like, I didn't think to. Basically, he was saying he was being overwhelmed.
Yeah, and he was naive too, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, that scene pretty much crystallizes your point, where everybody around him just views him either as disposable or as like the grandmother, like a tool, you know. And again, I think that just reinforces the inner drive he already had. That like, then you know what, I'm gonna look out for myself. And like, again, we'll build to the ending, but and like he makes it. I think it starts clicking in his brain because we see how his relationship with Ashok deteriorates, right? Like he suddenly Pinky leaves, and he, you know, as most men happen when they lose the woman of their dreams, like they go down the toilet, and he deteriorates himself, and that relationship deteriorates. And then everything starts crystallizing for him that, like you said, like, oh, shoot, like if this guy just throws me to the wind, like I'm done, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he ends up he almost has like this epiphany moment after the whole kid car fiasco and the confession that he starts realizing like almost like the pure capitalist mindset of like, okay, I'm going to take care of myself and whatever decision I need to make to do that.
I don't think it was quite at that point. It was a little bit later on.
But it starts crystallizing for him.
It starts more and more. It's an evolution, right? He wasn't quite at that point where he's full jaded. The point at which he gets full jaded is when he reads the lips of like he's going to get replaced.
Yeah, but also
that was full jaded, but like we got to get to that point.
But also like the nephew shows up, right? Like and
the nephew shows up later.
Oh, even after that, okay. But yeah, he starts.
So what it ends up happening, and I don't know if you remember, is Pinky, like, basically they make him sign all that. Like, Pinky and Ashok are having problems. And then at some point, Pinky goes down to, that's the other thing. And that's, oh man, is that dynamic of Pinky and Ashok. Pinky wants to go back to the States. And Ashok kind of like tells her, we'll discuss this later. And they don't want to have this conversation. And he's like, I'm India. Like, I need to be here for my people. And that was a sort of interesting rift. And so then at some point, Pinky goes down while Ashok is sleeping and asks Balaram to drive her to the airport. And then later on, Balaram essentially tells Ashok that, his wife had left him. Oh, yeah. And then that was a powerful scene because like Ashok just blames Balaram for everything. Right, and at some point he's just like, "Please, like, don't touch me." And the dude's pushing him, assaulting him. Why wouldn't you tell me? Blah blah. And then that was a powerful scene. Is when Balaram, the first time he actually like stands up for himself and he pushes Ashok to the ground.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he fights back for once. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And that's when things really start changing for him.
Yeah, he doesn't feel like he's rightly blamed for that, and it starts like I guess his inner emotions start taking over. But like Ashok just takes the easy, and this is a trend with that couple, right? Takes the easy route and just blames him. But like obviously,
well, that's when he says at some point he's like, "I wish they had thrown you in jail."
Yeah,
and it's I remember reading that line. I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, when he hits the ground, yeah.
I was like, "Whoa!" That was next level. You're the one who killed the kid. You never wanted to have this. Or like your wife is the one who killed the kid, right? You put Balaram in a bad position, and then you basically didn't want to have a discussion with your wife of like what your true intentions were. She decides to leave, and then you blame Balaram for everything. It was wild. It was wild.
Yeah,
and that you want to see yourself as the good guy through all of this.
yeah, that's how people are, though.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
know.
like,
It's nuts, dude.
you're right. We didn't really discuss the couple that much, but you could tell the undercurrent with Pinky and Ashok is that.
She want to go back to the States. They
Yeah,
thought they
like
were
I
going to be there
think.
for like 6 months.
Yeah, because they met like when he was studying in the States, right? And like I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
she
Like
thought
NYU
like
or whatever.
yeah, she thought like, oh, okay, we're visiting, but like we're not really staying here. Because like to your point, like they're still somewhat Americanized, right? So it's not like they can just plop in there. You even feel this with their tensions with the family, right? Like they're not fully there, but there's traits that they bring to this. Like they're in this
Yeah,
between two
and you
worlds.
even see this right a little bit later when basically like Ashok is depressed because his wife has left, and so he tries to. Balaram cheers him up, and he takes him to like go get food. He basically says, "I acted like I was his wife," right? In terms of showing him a good time and try to like put his happiness ahead of everything else. And so then they go ahead, and he takes him to go eat some like local food, and he's like, "Oh, this is the best food." And he's like, "You really know the true India." He's like, "From now on, I'm going to eat just like you," or something like that. Which just goes to show how like out of touch that he is from a class standpoint and in terms of being diaspora.
Exactly. That's a whole other topic, but yes, exactly. Like so he's caught between two worlds, but also like you were saying, like their goals are not aligned, right? And we talked about this off the pod, right? Like how in the end a lot of relationships end up breaking not because of like they're not attracted to them, but because like their life goals aren't aligned at all, and they don't discuss this until like or ever because this couple
should have
didn't
had
really
this
discuss
discussion like years ago, probably.
Yeah, because she wants to obviously be have like probably a career, like let's say the traditional Americanization. And
dude, she grew up in Jackson Heights.
Yeah, and he wants to be a power broker in New Delhi. He says this like New Delhi is my future.
No. It was Bangalore.
Bangalore. But he says like this is my future. I want to be part of the future. I want to build it. My vision, all that stuff, right?
Well, he wants to be in IT, diversify. As it's a cliche word.
Yeah,
diversify in IT in Bangalore.
Yeah, and like. Because you're right, like we're getting everything through our main character, but like he's hearing this from the husband, and he's hearing otherwise from the wife, and he goes, "This doesn't." Even in his mind, he's just like, "This doesn't seem like it connects."
Nope, not at all.
They're like it's like one person like in a relationship saying like, "Yeah, I don't believe in marriage, and I'm new school, all that stuff." And then the wife, the soon or the wannabe wife is like, "No, I do believe in that stuff." It's like, wait, did you not talk about this at all? Like, how long you been together?
They've been together a while. You can tell.
Yeah, so it's like, but often people do that, right? Like they enter the lull and they never confront the truths. And that's just how people are, right? Because I think Robert Frost says, right? Like, you got to take the road less traveled, and most people don't, right? They just want to think that things will just resolve themselves, which I never understood the logic in that. Like, this will just resolve itself.
I think it's this weird hope that everything will just work out. And it's like, it won't do that unless you work it out. Yeah,
exactly. Like, to your point, they should have had that conversation before. But for us, the film viewers, like, we see that, like, this was never going to work. At one point in the movie, I actually was like, unless they talk about it or there's some resolution, this is not going to work out. Which
you can see it because she keeps saying, "When are we going to?" I don't think he wants to leave.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Oh,
right?
And before she actually leaves, and I think it was a little bit before all of this. What was interesting was when Pinky actually shames him for scratching his private area, and like he had stains. Yeah. Basically, he was saying, and then he goes through this sort of self-realization where he buys toothpaste and like better clothes and like anti-itching cream, and he's like, "How come my father never told me to do all this?" Right? And he's like, "I just live essentially like an animal," and that was a crazy like moment of self-realization of like things that there were different ways that classes sort of behaved or behavior that was acceptable amongst different classes within India. I thought that was a really powerful scene. I was like, whoa.
That was a powerful scene. Also, like, it reinforces the class dynamic of India.
Yeah.
He doesn't answer the question, but as a viewer, you can answer it for him, right? He gets to get taught this because that's what his dad knew. And his dad was probably.
He even said, "How come my dad never taught me not to do these things?" It was like, well, because his dad never taught him to do those things.
Yeah, and then his dad probably didn't teach him that. Like, it's just trained behavior because they're stuck in this caste system and they don't know anything else.
Yeah, that was very powerful. I was like, whoa.
And he starts realizing that he doesn't want to live like that. Like I said, it's a lot of seeds that get planted to reach, like you said, to his like full circle, like I'll do whatever it takes, capitalistic mentality. But like there's little seeds like that happen throughout of his character. His character arc is actually one of the strong points of the film. You see how he's slowly evolving through just like
Yeah.
big events, but also little events, and it starts
Well,
crystallizing.
yeah, sort of the catalyst, or like what ends up happening, right? He does everything. He agrees to take all the blame. Pinky leaves, and then like he tries to like put a shock's happiness in front of everything else. And then what the sort of catalyst was, he gives one of the beggars some money, and the mongoose and Ashok both say, "Why the heck did you do that? We never told you to do that." Basically, every aspect was controlled, and he's like, "Wow." He's like, "After everything I've done for all of them, and this is how they still treat me and control me." Right, and he's done a lot, and so when he's like, kind of like, you know what, screw all that, I'm done. He's like, and he learned how to. He basically went like full opposite way. He's like, these guys don't care about me, so I have to care about me, and he just goes and tries to cheat his the
He does
people he
side
works
hustles.
for.
He does side hustles. Yeah.
Side hustles, right? He like writes fake invoices, which was genius, to like for like repairs that never existed, so he can just keep the money cash.
Yeah.
And then he like uses more petrol than is like needed, and he just resells that to other drivers. And then the third thing is that on this free time, while he's going to pick up, the person he works for, he'll pick up other people and drop them off on destinations along the way to Cat. Basically, he was kind of like Uber without being Uber.
Yeah, what he was doing is the seeds of his entrepreneurial mindset starts becoming.
Well, he asked the other drivers how they did things, and they told him, "This is what we do." Yeah, he's like, it's either eat or be. Oh, because the thing was, he's like, how's this going to end? He asked the driver with vitiligo, and he's like, if you're lucky, you'll be able to like basically have a shack on like the outskirts of the city, right? If you've done enough and saved some, he's like, and if you have done a little bit more, he's like, you might be able to get a little bit more. He's like, but that's it. That's what you're done. And so then Balaram kind of realizes, he's like, screw that. He's like, I need to look after myself and try to do more. Yep. And so that's what he starts doing. And then he realizes, even though I'm doing all this, he's like, it's not enough. And then he realizes that at some point, he realizes that he asked his, that's what happens. Basically, he wanted to talk to Ashok about something and basically tell him to his face like how much of a piece of crap he is. But he doesn't actually say anything, right? And then Ashok's like, I know what you're thinking. You haven't. He's like, you haven't seen your family for a while. He's like, take a couple days off on me. And he's like, all expenses paid. And he's like, and that punk only gave me enough to like go one way. And he's like, but I know. Oh no. And so he's like, that was it. But he ends up picking up his like nephew.
Yeah.
Right. And so then he sees his nephew, right? And he introduces his nephew to Ashok. And he's like, that was the only time that he's ever given me a day off. And he's like, but I know how these rich people think. And he's like, nothing's ever for free. And then he spies on like what's going on. And he's like, and then I spotted him meeting my replacement.
Yeah.
Basically, he just wanted him to kick him out for the day so that he could try to find a replacement driver. And that sort of sets up the catalyst. He's like, and I already knew what I had to do at that point. And so then it sets up the sort of the final scenes.
What did you think of the nephew being sent as messenger boy?
That's not surprising.
Yeah, not surprising, but I was just like, man, this movie's going full throttle here. Like, leave no stone unturned, he still rejects the lifestyle his grandmother wants. But yeah, like, it is very, the nephew showing up was, and it was funny too, because the grandmother wants him to learn to be a driver so he could be the new, like,
breadwinner,
and then he can just get married and provide those critical grandchildren. It's interesting how like the mindset is rigid, and it's like it doesn't make sense given how they live, but like let's still do the plan. It's just crazy, right?
Mm-hmm. There's no thinking about how to try to get out of there.
Yeah, it is Yeah, it's just crazy. And so okay, so I guess we're building up to that scene where he takes the we miss over this fact, right? Like Ashok is gathering this big bribe of money, right? He wants to, I forgot who he wants to bribe, but he's gathering all this money.
Oh, no. So, little key pieces is like, amidst all that, what ends up happening is Balram sees that he looks into one of the bags at one point, and it's like cash money. It was like 1 million of whatever the currency is, and he's like, "That's like 2 years' salary." He's like, "That's insane." He's like, "That's a lot, but that's not enough if I was going to make my grand escape for like me to actually do it." And so he kind of sees, if I'm going to go all the way, I'm going to go all the way. And so what ends up happening is all these bribes were for other politicians to oppose a socialist leader. And what ends up happening, and this is a funny part, is the socialist leader wins, and Ashok is just pissed. He's like, all those stupid villagers ended up voting for her. And that's like the discrepancy amongst like the poor and like the rural India, or I'm sorry, the rich and the rural India, right? And he's like, these stupid idiots voted for her. And he's like, how stupid of them. And he's like, well, dude, what did you expect them to do? You guys don't do anything for the poor. At least this lady gives sort of the face or facade that she's going to do something for the poor, right? And they're like, it's just funny seeing like at the beginning how much empathy Ashok has for like the people who are abused in India, and at the end he just becomes another jaded like rich elite, right, who just views them as idiots. And that's how it comes full circle. And so like they end up picking up so Balram is the driver, and he hears all this, and they pick up Ashok as well as the newly elected socialist prime minister. And then, they do all the stupid little pleasantries where Ashok and Mongoose are like, we're so thrilled that you won. Congratulations, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, we'd like to make a very generous investment of $1 million, blah, blah, blah. And her and her investor are like, cut the crap. We know you gave at least 2 to 3 times as much to our competition. And so she's like, if you want to keep your position, he's like, you already tried ousting me. It didn't work. I want $4 million tomorrow. And so then they're like, crap. And so then that's when Balram is like piecing everything together. I was like, oh, he's going to have $4 million tomorrow. Tomorrow's when I got to make my move.
Yeah. And he makes his move, which is another great, powerful scene when he makes that move.
Oh, man.
With the whiskey bottle and everything. But how he does it too. It's raining.
It's raining. He pulls over to the side. He says there's something issue with the car. And he's like, and you could tell, Ashok is like, why don't we just call somebody? He's like, dude, they're not going to get here for several hours. And he's like, because it was downpour, torrential.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're going to be screwed here. He's like, so you can either wait several hours or you can try helping me, man. He's like,
no, but the scene's great, though, how he does it. I think we just need to push. I think if you just go out and push, like, because
no. But the other thing is, he's like, be careful for the bottle that's there. And he already had the broken bottle, like, right in the dirt there.
Yeah.
It's like it was crazy. It was just having the murder weapon in plain sight. And, Ashok thought nothing of it.
He didn't, because he, like you said, like, he never saw it coming. He never saw the move coming. Yeah.
No. He never saw the chicken come out of the coop.
Yeah. And like we cite often, right? If you strike at the king, you best not miss. And he did not miss.
Nope.
Killed that guy like in cold blood.
In like the most brutal way possible. He basically slit his throat and just let him bleed out there.
Bleed out, yeah. And they took the money and then became an entrepreneur.
So that's the thing, right? And that's what's complicated about everybody's morality. And that's why I like this film, is because they showed the morality sort of blurred with everybody, right? He can be like, man, that he did that dude cold. He murdered him, but then he decided not to leave his nephew and took him along with him and took care of his nephew.
Yeah, he did. He's like as we get to the ending, right? He raises him basically. At least what's implied to us is that he's going to raise him the way he wished he was raised. Like you're going to be merit based. You're going to have opportunities that I didn't have, and you'll make what you can of yourself.
The line I did love, and I was like, damn, that was powerful. And he's like. It was towards the end where he says, if you're poor in India, the only way to come out is through politics or through crime. I chose the latter. He's like, is this what it's like in your country? And I was like, dang, dude. I was like, they trying to hit home with some lines here.
Yeah, that was a good line. Yeah. I mean, the film is. I mean, you could tell.
They had some banger like writing in this film. I'll give them credit. They had some good lines.
You can also tell the film is like newer, right? Because it's talking about topics and ethnic groups that are like more now in the American conscious, right? Like 40 years ago, no movie was gonna be made about this, you know.
Well, what do you mean?
Like, you know, I think now we're
about
seeing
India.
More, yeah, because in our American culture, we see a little more
they had
prominence.
Actually something that was a film that had to do with. Right, it wasn't in India, but it was a look at some Indians within the U.S. It was actually Mississippi Masala, and that was made in the '80s with Denzel Washington, I believe. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, but definitely now I feel like the what's the term I'm looking for? The area is fertile for this because we see comedians getting really popular. We see a lot more social cultural.
Well, I mean, back in the early 2000s, Russell Peters was getting pretty big. And he was Indian diaspora living in Toronto.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot more of this diaspora. I mean, it's not just India; we see it also with
getting a lot bigger. Hassan Minhaj.
No, but also we see this with other cultures too. We see Egyptian. You know, we see a lot more nowadays.
Trevor Noah.
Yeah, we see a lot more nowadays than I think we would have in the 70s or even
sure, but that's part of advancement. I mean, look, for a while, like it was. I mean, we have a racist history. There was a glass ceiling of entry for some groups to sort of get in, right? What was a big deal was when the Cosby, as controversial as his name has become, but the Cosby Show at the time was seen as a huge deal, right? Because it was centered around the black family, and then you had the Jeffersons and a bunch of others that sort of started paving the way around that time. But before then, you didn't really have a lot of shows just focused on black Americans.
Yeah.
And eventually, right, that sort of paved the way. And then that paved the way for other like shows to become more acceptable within the American consciousness. And now, like, you have a lot more stories being told.
So yeah, so to touch upon the ending, we touched upon a little bit with the nephew, but like, yeah, he takes this money. He builds he's building a new company. I think it has to do with like.
Before he gets to that, he realizes he needs to take out the competition. So what does he do? He gives a bribe to the police.
Oh yeah, the bribes. He does the bribes to the police because some of them are not licensed, right?
A lot of them are not.
Yeah.
So he basically gives them a huge bribe to be like, "Yo, man," and he's like, "What's this for?" And he's like, "For what you're gonna do for me." I was like, man, the confidence was great.
Yeah, and that's true. They're like, yeah, like it's a win-win. You know, you're gonna crack down on this unlicensed driver. Yeah, they all get arrested too. I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, he cleaned house, and then he develops a monopoly of a taxi service for all the IT companies in Bangalore, and he makes a killing. But at the same time, so he does all that. He participates in corruption, but at the same time, he actually treats his employees very well, like a family. And he's like, I wanted to do things differently, not like how my previous employers ran things. I was like, yeah, this is interesting because it's very complicated. Because like it reminds me in many ways of like.
I wouldn't use the word family. I would say like he.
Well, he treats them well, like employees, right?
Yeah.
Not like in fact, no, you're right. He says because he's like my previous employers said I was family, but they didn't really. He's like, that was superficial. They didn't treat me like it. He's like, they're employers. He's like, but I treat them well. Or they're my employees, but I treat them well.
So it goes back to maybe like I always go whenever I talk to my stepdad, like we always just discuss a lot. But one of the things we always come back to sometimes is like one of the more important things that our civilization has given to the world is like the power of contract law. I mean, I'm not the biggest lawyer guy, but rule of law.
Sure.
And like you said, like it's very transparent. Right? You're not my family, but like if you do X, Y, Z, and you're you're gonna get paid this, and if this happens, like he says, like you're protector. Like if you hit a kid, it's on the company. You might not get promoted ever, but it's on the company, right? But like instead of this, like favors and like
and then beyond that, he also said as part of compensation, he's like, if your other grandson is looking for work and wants to be a driver, he's like, they can come under my apprenticeship, basically.
Yeah. So it's a much more like.
Well, it's how do I say this? It's more westernized way of doing things in terms of contract law.
Exactly. And so, because he realized
It's not like weird nepotism.
Yeah, because he like I think one of the takeaways he gets through his own life is like, I'm not gonna run this show like, oh, it's my nephew, he should just inherit my company, or it should just be, he'll have more opportunities, but like
Or
it's
like
not
how they did in Mexico, where teachers would just sell their positions as teachers.
Okay, dude, we don't have to go back to Mexico, dude. Like that teacher union, I don't even know. Okay, dude. Like, first of all, I like how they protest, and I'm like, why are you protesting? Oh, we're getting shortchanged.
Yeah.
You
What
kidding me?
do you mean? You wouldn't educate anybody. Anyway,
what do you mean you're
sorry,
getting
we're
shortchanged?
going. It's just something we both know a lot about, so that's why we always bring that up.
Go talk to the villagers that don't even have a chance. You're like,
Well, that's for another film.
Yeah. But yeah, like that's what's interesting about the movie, right? It's this film is that like there was all these problems.
Yeah,
the
but
character is not likable at times, and yet at the end you go, well, who do I pick really? Ashok and his family, or he takes his name, but Balaram.
Well, you could say that Balaram was a product of it. It's really interesting, and the character that he actually kind of reminds me of, because his really a complicated, blurred morality, but he still has morality, was like Omar from The Wire, where it's like he had his own and not everything he did was great or you could sort of stomach, but you can kind of respect some of the lines that where he drew, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think also like to have the more cynical analysis towards the ending, I would say like at least what he realizes that if you want to really build a good business, there is no real, and maybe this is where we've gone too far in America, but like if you want to build a good business, there's no room for being sentimental or playing like favorites and stuff. You got to get best performance wins, the
capitalist mindset.
Yeah, but you could argue that the monopoly thing was kind of dirty, but
it was dirty. Well, it was not the true. That's what you call
yeah, it was
crony capitalism.
But it's true, like how he was treated as an employee servant versus how he treats his
employees. It's all relative, right?
Yeah,
it's relatively better. But one thing I wanted to say is like he changed his name to Ashok, which was kind of like ironic, right? And then what does he say at the end? He's like, the reason I was never caught in the end. He's like, I could have looked like a half million other of my of my countrymen. I was just like, wow. I was like that level of stereotyping is insane. No one else could say that.
Yeah, and I think the director gets away with it because I think he comes from that background.
Because he's probably Indian. But also, like, things that are not acceptable here in the U.S. might be more acceptable in India.
No, he's actually Iranian.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
So he's not even Indian. But I think the way he crafted the film and the way... I think it's also based on a book that is Indian.
Yeah.
So probably, you know how it is in our society now. Like, I think probably if he gets attacked, he'd be like, "This is what the book says."
So the one thing I wanted to ask you is, what did you think about his other very famous line? So all of this is done. I don't think we ever prefaced this. He's narrating this through a letter that he's telling to a
Chinese
CEO from China who's going to be coming to like Bangalore, and he basically tells him He's like, this is no longer the year of the Westerner. He's like, this is the year of the yellow and brown. This is their words within the film. So don't come after me. That's literally what they say. Basically, this is the year of the coming of China and India. And I was curious as to what your thoughts were on that, Chris.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't have time for 2 hours on this pod. But I will tell you that I don't know. I know a little bit of the Indian mentality, but only through the diaspora. And I read a lot about China, as you know. I mean, I posted in our group chat about Xi's right-hand man. And I'm actually reading his book that he wrote in 1988 about his finding when he was in America, like traveling the country. I'm only in the beginning, first 10%, but I find it very fascinating because insights.
Was it as fascinating as, remind me, who was the Russian author that you...
Okay. I'm not trying to get canceled. Yeah. But this guy's not as good as a writer. The other guy he could tell he had more romantic, poetic language. This is much more like his first chapter. He says like, in America, I see this is 1988 when he wrote it, I think. I see 3 big trends: cars, credit cards, and something else. Like he says that the 3 C's, like cars, credit cards, and I forgot the 3rd C, and he uses each of these.
Computers?
Maybe it's computers, yeah. But like three things are dominating American society, and everybody from rich to poor has like a connection to this through one of these seas, right? Poor people have cars even, right? Like, anyways, to answer your question, I think, and this is made for Americans to realize, because I think we tend to be in our own bubbles and think like, yeah, I'm not going to go on a rant.
No, please do.
But
former audience.
But even for, I think, and I can't speak, I don't know that many Chinese like diaspora, but for the Indian diaspora, I do know they view a lot of the stuff that quote unquote white people talk about. And actually that's what when I'm around them, that's what they say. Like, oh, it's a white person discussion point. Like, oh, systematic. Like, they're not debating in their minds if they need more police. They know, like, with their parents and grandparents tell them there's no rule of law in police, what it looks like, in India, right? So they go, yeah, I don't understand. Like, they're not perfect, but they're way better than what what you could you can experience in other places. And and they're really all about like that the same thing we see our main character moving up. Now they don't have as much faith in their country as maybe some Chinese do in China, but so like they just want to move up here. But they don't get lost in the I gotta find myself
in the narrative.
I gotta find myself, or like, I live to work. No, they understand that work is sometimes about suffering, and they like embrace it. To your point, like they find some kind of enjoyment in that because like they understand the bigger picture. And I think a lot of the coddled, like Jonathan Haidt says, the coddling of the American mind has been, oh, I need to have this fulfilling relationship. Oh, I need to have this fulfilling, like, oh, suffering is so bad. Oh, I'm the reason I don't move ahead is because systematic patriarchy. Trust me, they're them. That's like, well, they had white people problems. That's what they say. It's crazy, dude. Like, they go,
I mean, I have a buddy who I've talked to you about before from Ethiopia. He's like, and we were talking about like a lot of issues that like are sort of permeating the American consciousness. A lot of more like woke sentiments. And he's like, bro, people in Ethiopia, half of them are just trying to figure out where they're going to eat. And he's like, this is problems that just only exist here.
Yeah,
and like, we don't think of those. He's like, we're focused on our primary needs, and then he's like, these secondary things come later.
Yeah, no, but I would argue that like from the conversations I have, even these secondary things doesn't even compute in their brain. And actually, they view it as an opportunity. They go like, if they're going to be focused on this, then I could be top dog. Now, how it connects to the movie is that, like, I don't know if the like I said, this line connects to that, but my interpretation based on my life is that like
it could be
is that like they're like, yeah, like, but it's not explicit, right? So you can only implicitly imply.
Sure.
But my interpretation is that's what clicked in my brain when I heard that line, is that like, because in its own way, not directly the same quotes, but I feel like, I was just kidding in my brain, like all these connections of like, people think that like, they have this certain worldview. And they say they branch out, but I kind of doubt it, because like the people, they also even like, let's say I know like people from other, ethnicities. That's true. But like, are they Americanized to the point where like, you're just getting the same opinion, right? If I meet somebody that's like Asian and they're just like, this Asian stereotypes are bad. Like they're just talking like very wokey. Like you're not getting a different interpretation. Like, are you listening to people who are like, stop complaining, like grind, like,
I agree, and I think they were speaking to the cultural differences, but I think the movie was also making the point that the countries that are going to be dominating the economic landscape going forward are going to be India and China. I was just kind of curious if you.
That I think that's TBD. I think right now we're at a crossroads in history. I don't think India's going to fulfill its potential, to be honest with you. I think they're going to survive just because they have a big geography, and China's the same thing. I think right now, to me.
So, who do you think will dominate in the coming years?
I think there's only two. Well, there's technically three possibilities, but I'm going to go with the two that I believe are more realistic. And then I'll say the third one that I think is the fanciful romantic one. So the two I see now is either we're going to go towards a centralized model, so more like China. Because right now people are perplexed by China. But once I discovered this right-hand man advisor and dug more into him, I realized that like I'm reading his book now, he's realized that what's happened to America has happened to China, right? It's all commercialized. There's no value system. It's all money and aesthetic and fakeness and people addicted to TikTok. And that's why they're putting all these hard rules. Like if you watch their version of TikTok, like for too long, it's
even video games, I think is only like 2 hours a day max.
Yeah. Video games, same thing, because, she only cares about power. We know this. He does all these power moves, right? But this advisor's plan in his mind that like, if he wants to be immortal, he has to defeat what he considers the great evil, which is like this Western commercialization. And so they're doing these draconian changes. And it's funny how business leaders in America don't get it. They're just like, oh, he's just cracking down. Because a quote that I found very powerful, and it's mentioned in the podcast I sent you too, is that
I think they've kind of understood they created a monster.
Yes.
Like they're more indebted than we are, but I think 3 times. 3 times as indebted as we are, which is crazy. Like people talk about like our crazy spending and our indebtedness as a country, and it's like you guys don't understand like the level, and that's what we know of. Like China doesn't release all of their, macroeconomic data. They could even be more indebted than that. We don't truly know. We assume it's like 2.5 to 3 times. So that's why it's funny seeing like some people talk about China as this like monster that they don't fully understand.
Yeah, so I think the jury's out. I don't know how the twists and turns of history will go. History always does that to people when you read it, like, you study history enough. I think that what this advisor has realized, the Huan Wei, is that, everybody looks at GDP, economics, like your point, demographics. He is like, this is why I found a bit of a kindred spirit. He understands what I understand, that like in the end, the value systems is what's going to win. Whoever has the real value systems are going to win. They're going to be the top dog.
Someone else said that I don't necessarily agree with this person in terms of like their solutions, but their diagnosis is correct. When this person said growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of cancer. And I think that China is beginning to realize that more and more. There's other things that you should focus on.
Yeah. But China has been focused on growth. So I'm going to be honest with you, the unwinding can't be easy.
Oh, no, it's going to be painful. I think it could lead to lasting effects.
And also, it might not
even
work.
With
it
the
might
real
be too late.
Market.
It might be
jury's still out. I mean, CCP is trying to push for the CEO of Evergrande to unload and bail his company out of its financial distress, even though his net worth is a fraction of the total indebtedness.
So that to me is the question mark, is that if that doesn't work, then like to your point, and like I said, the people who've been like,
I don't understand like they're going to unwind, right? Which means there's going to be less growth, which means there's going to be less mobility of the lower classes going into the middle class. Do you think that's going to lead to a great social complacency or more social unrest?
The logic is more social unrest. What this advisor is betting on, the more I read about him, is that he's betting on almost very old values, like the stuff from the Middle Ages or old China. Like in the end, it will be this religious, spiritualistic experience that will guide them through this. Now, that's a big bet. I give him credit.
That reminds me of like who's the advisor that I'm blanking on for Putin, who kind of thinks the same way with Russian Orthodox.
Oh yeah, Dugin,
thank you.
Another man I studied heavily too. Anyways, I respect these bets because these bets are like, it's like betting on a Google, right? Like either it's gonna work or it's gonna blow.
Or it's gonna fail miserably.
Yeah, but right now, unfortunately, we've let things.
But they have to do something, right? Because basically, the way a lot of people don't understand the way a lot of industries in China and really in the U.S. do too work is through basically a backdoor Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
And that's not the way of truly sustaining lasting growth.
Exactly. And also,
it's healthy. I mean, like, sorry, a quick little tangent for people who just don't know what the whole saga. What, like, companies like Evergrande, how they got so big and why they were such promises, they would buy sorry for swearing. They would buy real estate. They would say, those are my assets, until they'd go find loans. And then they use those loans to buy more real estate. And then they would use that as saying they had more assets, so then they would take out more loans. And they kept doing this over and over again, right? And then they would use people's, what was it? It was like deposits for new real estate to then use that to then buy more real estate. And so it just became this crazy, weird Ponzi scheme where now they're have what's their debt value of
the official term
$400 billion or something like that?
Well, it's not a Ponzi scheme when it's called fractional reserve lending.
No, it's a Ponzi scheme. I don't know how.
Fractional reserve lending. Legalize the Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
I have a dollar. I have a dollar, and I loan out $100.
I have a dollar, and I like to take out money worth 10 times that much. Right? That's one of them when they. Oh my god. Anyway, that's why we like countries end up in trouble in certain sectors, and that's why things blow up, like in the financial crash of 2008.
Yeah, and
Now, there are some people, Animal Spirits podcast, who think we're crazy.
Okay, you don't have
but,
to name them. That T-shirt's coming for me too. Anyways, I ordered it. Yeah, can't wait to hopefully it gets here for you.
I like to call certain people out on this pod. Anyway, it's my platform.
So that was. I mean, I don't. We don't have time, but like, that's Avenue 1. Avenue 2 is what I've stolen from Balaji, the former CTO of Coinbase. Is the crypto civilization where old legacies die, legacy institutions die, and new ones. Not saying better. Actually, I'm changing my tune. Not saying better, but new institutions take their place because just like old software that just can't function anymore, which he says is like our current monetary system, our current government structure, our current political structure. New ones just organically spruce up. Now, there's a lot of risk in that, right? Because when you do that, you don't know what you're getting, right? It could be better, it could be worse. The jury's out, right? Like if you listen to Varoufakis and Zizek's recent conference 2 weeks ago, they're aware of this too. They're starting to see that like this techno-feudalism is maybe coming. Not very optimistic take. Yeah. The other guy I follow closely, but anyways, the third avenue.
Oh, like you and Nick, you with Nick Land as well.
Okay, bro, you don't have to out me so hard, bro. You know me. I read all dangerous thinkers. I love them.
Oh, I read some too. I mean, the person I was talking about when I said with the ideology of cancer was actually Curtis Yarvin. Now, I agree with like what some of the things that he says about like things that are going wrong in society.
Will always have a special place in my mind.
No, but what I will say is I agree with like a lot of his sort of takes in terms of things that are going wrong in society. But I don't agree with. I mean, some of the guy's solutions I just don't agree with. Because he wants to go back to like the Middle Ages. Basically, he's like our version of Xi's advisor.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he's that's the bet he would like to see made.
Yeah.
And then I'm going through this fast, but the third way, and this is the ironically the most optimistic route is the podcast I sent you with Joe Rogan, like this weird world where suddenly we're gonna have like the right amount. Like I just didn't buy it, anyways. But basically, it ties in with Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. If we can create a metaverse that like kind of like, basically create a world where we basically decouple, like basically we create this new world. Like, no, seriously, like we did, like America did like centuries ago when Europeans came here and they created a new world. That is really like the other bet, right? Musk and Bezos. Or even Zuck.
Yeah, it basically like betting on what Serial Experiments Lane predicted 20 some odd years ago.
Exactly.
So we're gonna have a society that's just gonna be based essentially fully in the metaverse.
Yeah, and like in this new world, it's fertile ground, and we can build a better world now.
All right. I mean, didn't the Matrix talk about this like 20 some odd years ago too? Look how that society turned out.
And that's why like I'm not betting on that because I just don't find that more as. I find that to be the.
I mean, it's insane when you see like things like this happen. I was like, didn't the Wachowski brothers talk about some of the downfalls of this like years ago? Same thing with like A Brave New World.
Exactly.
And no one's really questioning it
because everything's going to be better. But it's because like if
you really, of course, right? Because the elites tell you it's going to be better, so it's going to be better.
Because the sad reality is, if you really study the philosophical landscape, you're left with these three options. So yes, if I had to like choose, let's gamble on the metaverse.
Yeah, and the other thing that I forgot, I don't want to get canceled. I forgot that they both decided to that they were not the original gender they were assigned. So I apologize. The Wachowski sisters. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. They are their sisters. Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things where the more I think about it, the more I don't see great options. But I have to have faith that people will make the right choices when matters most. Based on nothing.
More my thinking with what they were talking about. We went on a long tangent, but essentially, I think the things that are going to be holding China back a lot are really their demographic profiles, in that they have some of the biggest gender imbalances.
Same thing with India.
China and India. That's what I just said. The two countries with the largest gender. I believe there's 40 to 50 million more men than there are women in India.
Yeah.
China is right around there. Plus, China is, I believe, the second fastest aging country in the world right now. That doesn't lend itself to very promising futures, in my view.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, like I said, history has some weird twists and turns. We'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, going to that film, and we got to wrap it with ratings, is that quote I think represents a mindset of certain people in those societies, but the reality is that it's going to be a lot messier than any of us realize.
What I wanted to say is like that just seemed like some nationalist propaganda, and I don't know exactly what they were trying to say with that, but I was like, we need to break that down a little bit. Not to say everything's perfect here in the U.S. I think we're gonna be going through our own pains. I mean, we have a lot of things that we still need to deal with here, but India and China definitely have their fair share of things they're gonna have to go through.
Well, it's been the buildup, right? Like, if you look at the argument that, again, I know that China started a little bit better with Deng Xiaoping, right? The what was billed to the people was like, if you suffer like crazy during our industrialization phase, we're gonna, wink, wink, nod, nod, we're gonna be the power, right? Now the reality has hit in. Like this guy, like I'm loving this book because he's real. Like this is 88, but he's realizing that like, wait, America seems so great on the surface, but when you go through the needle, it's funny. This is 1988. He's saying like, you see these people live in these mansions, and because he's in California during part of the book, he's like, but then I see these homeless people that are just suffering. Like how is this? How do they just walk by this?
But there's things that have been well, I don't understand. That's things that have been happening in China forever as well.
But you have to remember the mindset. So the mindset of this guy, this is when he's still an academic. He also has this view that even though China's communist, I think that this is what America's probably lost.
The governmental policy is that everybody's equal, even though that's not how it's necessarily played out within the greater society.
So I'm trying to say the point, right? Because I'm trying to use his words. But basically, the message I'm getting is that like, when you're an outsider, and this happens with a lot of outsiders, right? I think America's lost this since Afghanistan and stuff, the wars. But America for a generation represented, like what Sean Hannity says, the shining hill on the mountain. You see this with the Russian writers that I've been reading, and even like this Chinese guy. They have this view of America that's like, maybe that's the best part of our propaganda, that like in America, like everything's like you can go to the grocery store, you have 50,000 options, like people are having conversations. There's so much like cultural mixing, like.
They don't like, for them, it's this outside perception of just Hollywood and DC, and there's nothing else in between.
Yeah, and tech. And then they go under the ground and they go like, man, these people are miserable.
There's a lot
these
different.
People are unhappy. And so I'm trying to read the full book. It's not that long, but like I can see that the message he's getting is that like this materialism.
So I'm just curious, when you went there, were the only places he were like LA and New York?
No,
did he actually go to other places?
No. I'm at the part of this book where he went to an Amish town, and he says what he finds fascinating is that in America, this is allowed. He's like, they allow these people to practice their lives away from the other society as a whole. There's trade-offs, but they allow this. He says in China, this would never be allowed. And so
did he go to an Indian reservation as well?
I'm still in the beginning. I don't know, but he is not just going to like, he starts in like the Bay Area, but he's
I'll give him props. At least he went to like other like America's very unique.
This guy's like this guy. I mean, I haven't read the French guy that he did a similar experience, right? Democracy in America, Tocqueville. But this guy's a true intellectual. I would say like I have issues with obviously China, but this guy's a true intellectual in the sense that he doesn't just stay like.
In his little bubble?
New York and LA or whatever, Texas or whatever. Like he's trying to see every aspect of America where he can, and he sees that like how people live in one part is different than the other.
It's very different. Very different.
How like it is fascinating to him how like it all connects. But I get like again the article that I sent to the group kind of spoils the ending. He leaves.
I haven't read your article yet.
Well,
I gotta get
he leaves with the feeling of that's like he basically like. The wool is pulled from his face. Like, okay, America is great in many ways, but this is a road to doom. And so what the problem that he has now with China is he thinks it's the road to doom. At least, sorry. I won't disclose my opinion, but but he realizes now in China that it's the same problem, that they've sacrificed everything, including their value systems, for this industrialization, and it's getting them nowhere. Mm-hmm. It's like you said, demographic issues, all these other problems, and like, he sees like a soulless society, and like he was again. What's funny is that he was at one point on the side against Xi Jinping. Somehow he's convinced Xi Jinping to listen to him. This guy must be also a good political chess master.
He knows how to play the game.
Yeah, because like you're against usually you're against Xi Jinping, you're dead or in jail. And now he's like the top advisor. So it's very fascinating. I'm curious to like just learn about like even his like. How he navigates, but as you said, China's very secretive, and it's not going to.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I've actually been to China, so if we want to talk about. I got to read his article, and then I probably have my own ideas. So we'll see. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm not surprised that he's like stunned that the Amish live by themselves. I mean, at least how they have in China, they want sort of one policy for all, and for people who just aren't like the majority, they just end up putting them into slave factories.
So no, exactly.
That's not a great alternative.
And it's crazy. Like he wrote this in the late '80s, and he's having these like he's just bewildered. It's interesting to read someone who's just bewildered. Like I used to see the lines.
I mean, yeah, he's probably bewildered by how we like live. And then, yeah, I was in China. And I've read certain things that go on in China. I'm bewildered by certain things they do as well.
Yeah, and it's just interesting how like I'm like this part with the Amish, and he's just like, how is this permitted? Like I love how he writes it, like, how is this permitted? Like what?
top down policy, just telling everyone how they should live.
But also like he sees it as a waste of human potential, right? Like he says, like, you know, why aren't they like working for the productivity of the society? You know, like it's a very collectivist, collectivist thinking. And I'm just like, interesting. I like it's interesting, like because you can tell before he joins the political structure, this is the time in his life where he's just letting his thoughts roam free.
I'm curious as to. I'm very curious from this guy. What was his perception of the Cultural Revolution in China, as well as you know, a lot of the purges in the Ukraine in the 30s under, you know, the Stalinist rule, or like, you know, the huge civil war of communism in Ethiopia and abroad. What does he think of all of these in the pursuit of collectivism?
I wouldn't know, because right now I'm in that book is only focused on America. But also
yeah, but you get what I'm saying. It's like this guy critiques one thing, and then they never look at their like I. Could say many things about America that I think we should be doing better, or that we don't do well. But it's funny, like hearing some of these like takes from like China, where it's like, you guys take a look at like your own self-reflection, or where your own authoritarian governmental policies, what they've led to abroad. Like it's hasn't been all roses and sunshine. It's been a lot of death and destruction.
It's the same thing with Lemonov, right? Like he says all these things, but like. Is what his vision for Russia any better? Really, you know, it's basically.
I mean, they have a very brutal history, as well. Yeah. It hasn't been all roses and sunshine.
Because what I could argue with Lemonov is, in the end, his final conclusion is that the solution to our problems is a religious nationalism, basically. You know, when I say religious, not like the church, but I mean like you believe so strongly in the idea of like, you know.
Oh, not quite like what's going on in Poland?
I mean, kind of what's going on in Poland, actually. He's dead, but yeah, kind of what's going on in Poland and Hungary, you know, yeah. You know, it's like, you know, this mixing of old values, but really you're mixing with modern political theory. Like it's very weird. Like, what's the term? Like a chimera. Like it's a very weird animal. Like you know, it's like a mutation. You know. A centaurian, as they say, centaur, you know. But anyways, we should get back to ratings.
Yeah. Anyway, so we got on a huge tangent. In terms of our thoughts on the movie, we probably ended that about 25 minutes ago. So I apologize for this overextension. But if you stuck around this long, yeah, we'll give our ratings on this film. I'm sorry, we went into a big tangent there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I thought the acting in this movie was very well done. I didn't really know many of the actors aside from Priyanka Chopra, who played Pinky. I thought that they did well. I really enjoyed actually the main character's performance, because he really led you to see the way he portrayed the evolution of his character was actually really good. I thought he did a fantastic job. It was very believable. And you can see, so like he goes from this sort of naive person who's very ambitious in the countryside to someone who sees really the charade for what it is, or like how the society, and seeing like his progression from sort of naive sort of countryman who just wants to do his sort of role and move up, ambitious, to just becoming fully jaded. Right. It was quite the transformation to see like on screen. I thought the movie did very well, sort of, if you aren't familiar with a lot of Indian society and customs, did a good job sort of explaining a lot of things within India, a lot of themes that were really touched upon, especially with the caste system and views and class dynamics between rich and poor, and how they are different in India than they are necessarily in other countries around the world. We've covered a lot of films that had to deal with different class dynamics in the past on this podcast. But this one was truly different.
I like this type of films. I like this type of films.
Yeah, but this is truly different because I mean, culturally, India is very different from any other country in the world, and it's partly because it's like 500 different tribes that were kind of all smushed together into this one giant country. And so I thought it was really good from a theme standpoint. I thought the writing was very good. They had a lot of killer lines in this movie, or like lines that sort of just pierced through. And a lot of this film made me very uncomfortable with a lot of the comments that were sort of made, because I'm just not used to hearing a lot of that language really in American society. Partly because we have our own history with slavery and we have our own racism, but we don't have the built-in caste system that sort of persists into the culture today. So it was interesting to watch. Overall, I thought it was very good. I'd give this movie a 9.
That's fair. Yeah, I like this movie. I thought it was a good recommendation I got. I thought this movie, like I said, acting was good. I think it's one of those films that's in that good tier. It's not elite, but it's in that good tier. It gets you to think. It's got crafted its story pretty well. I think, to your point that you mentioned with some of the quotes, especially the nationalistic ones, they kind of just plop it there. To your point, like, you can interpret it in many ways, and
I thought it was a bit of propaganda. I wasn't quite sure or not.
Yeah, exactly. Is it propaganda? Is it just a quote that he liked in the book? Like, again, there were moments like that where it was like, if you're just planting the seed, fine, but that could be dangerous, right? It could veer either way without any context, and sometimes it felt like it was just plot.
There's no context there.
Yeah, that was something I took also like as a.
And it's like, was this trying to be a hit against the U.S.? I couldn't quite tell.
Exactly.
Or a dig.
Yeah, or is it just like something like, again, that happens with directors, right? Oh, I read the book. I like this quote, right? They read it once, or they get the cliff notes from somebody,
Or was it even in there? Sometimes that just might be his sentiments towards like other countries.
Exactly.
I'm not sure.
Exactly. It's the problem. Neither of us have read the book. And I thought like the film in general, what it was trying to portray did pull it off. But I think I do agree with a lot of your points. I thought, again, acting was good. I thought the writing overall was good. Mm-hmm. I did think that, again, that was one of my bigger critiques. The other one too was that the pacing was great. I did question if the movie could have been a bit shorter, but I'm okay with the length. The other thing I thought they could have also, if they didn't want to make it sure they want to go more in depth, I think it would have been interesting to explore a little bit. I mean, it wasn't the focus, but it would have been interesting to explore a little bit the diaspora aspect. I think that's a fascinating topic. And that's just not even just Indian. That could be like Vietnamese diaspora, Mexican diaspora, mm-hmm. Croatian diaspora. Mm-hmm. Like, it's an interesting world. I don't think there's enough films about that, actually. I think that would be interesting topics to explore there. So for me, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I thought the movie was upper tier. 8 for me is pretty high, as you know, my rating system.
Yeah, I was like, man, Chris is like, he's losing. He's getting a little too soft.
Yeah. I was debating between 7.5 and 8, but I was just like,
I thought for you, like, I was good. I couldn't really pick out anything. It was a solid performance, 6 out of 10.
My original rating when I first saw it was 7, but the more I thought about it, I was like, nah, it did more than I give it credit for,
Some of your ratings are just so unexplainable, really.
It's part of my dynamism. So 8 out of 10, good movie. Definitely recommend, especially if you're like, I've had the privilege of knowing more about this world just because of the people I've met. But if you haven't, this is a great way to just get you started down that path of understanding. Like, not saying this movie represents all the answers. It has its own opinion, as we've noted, but it gets you at least maybe reading about like the class structure there, the political structure there, the mm-hmm. cultural structure there, and even how that is blended out in America, because we see that with immigration that we've gotten some of that in our own society now.
Yep.
So yeah, that pretty much wraps up this long episode.
Very long. But yeah, anyway, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, of course, you have to like trigger with a big question. Like I just like you did this a
Loaded
couple times.
questions.
Yeah, I was like you did this a
There were
couple
like
times,
two.
and then like I ended up talking for like 30 minutes. But yeah, this film was good. Like always, please like and subscribe. And we don't get many comments these days, but I do track the numbers where I can. And we still have a small audience. So I mean, I think they're different people, but if you are listening, it's just we're still at the beginning stages. So I would say this is the time to like we have the bandwidth to have conversations to reply. So if we ever do get too large, like I don't see that happening. Like that's what happens.
Well, yeah, I doubt we're gonna get super large, but you never know. What may or likely may not happen. But anyway, yeah. And if you have any recommendations for films we should check out that you would like us to review, just please let us know in the comments. We'd be happy to take a look. I mean, as you could probably tell, our sort of film interest and films that we are cool with reviewing are pretty wide-standing. Like we review films from like both domestic and abroad that cover many ranges of topics. So yeah, just let us know and stay tuned for next week.